Hey, this is AJ Adams, and you're listening to the Head Smack Podcast.
You are listening to conversations with misfits, mavericks, and trailblazers.
Welcome to the Head Smack Podcast. My name is Paul Pavolny. I'm so excited to have AJ Adams with me today, another misfit that I've gotten to know, and so excited to look forward to talking to him. AJ Adams is a 20-year veteran marketing expert to 8- and 9-figure companies. And then through his companies, he is on a mission to help people get rich and give generously. Well, welcome, AJ.
Hey, Paul. Thanks for having me.
Hey, no problem. I was looking forward to this. I'm excited about what you're doing, and I want to hear all about it. And so 20-year veteran in the marketing space, that's quite an achievement. So tell me a little bit about the origin story of AJ Adams.
Yeah, absolutely. So I didn't start in marketing. I was in ministry for a long time. Growing up on a tiny island as a kid, I always had the desire to either be in front of people or communicate in some way. And through ministry, I was doing a lot of promoting, events, organizing. That's where I really got started in marketing, brand ambassador, different odd end jobs. But where I got into marketing and really started with branding first, I was working as doing a telemarketing job, not an entrepreneur at all. This was late 2011. My wife was working as a basketball coach part-time. And the coach asked me if I'd ever done motivational speaking. And she knew that I was a youth pastor for a long time, a lot of speaking. Do you ever do motivational speaking? And I said, sure. So I started researching motivational speakers, and I stumbled upon Les Brown, Tony Robbins, all the great names, Zig Ziglar, and I was mind blown. I saw this and I thought, these people are getting paid to talk. I didn't know this was a thing. So I dove deep into that, ended up giving that motivational talk to the varsity basketball team that my wife was coaching. It was horrible. I have it recorded. It's grainy footage. It was not a good talk. I ripped off some Eric Thomas motivational speech, but I dove deep into the world of motivational speaking, and I started studying because I'm all about pattern recognition. I didn't know how to get booked, to get noticed, get on stage, or get paid. But as I started to study, I started identifying all of these people have a brand. And you're a brand guy, I'm a brand guy. That's where I started. I started cultivating brand, learning how to position myself, get a message, develop a brand story. Well, fast forward within a year, I was getting paid more on stage for 45 minutes of talking than I was in a month at my job. So
Wow.
Fast forward.
And this was as a youth pastor?
No, this was, I went into schools. So I realized I can go reach kids in schools who will never step foot into a church, and I can get paid for it and bring a real positive message. So I started doing that. And I went through some brand iterations that would make you cringe as a brand guy. I was I first started like just a generic motivational speaker. Then I was the black belt leadership speaker because I have a martial arts background. I'd break bricks on stage and talk about mindset. Kids loved it, but traveling and speaking and breaking bricks is not sustainable, especially when you have to carry the bricks back across a college campus. So,
oh man, the power team.
Exactly. Yeah. Wow. Taking it way back. The power team. I remember that San Diego Horizon Church. The power team came through breaking big blocks of ice. Wow. That just gave me a flashback.
Not always a good one. So where did, for most people, the idea of public speaking is terrifying. They say it's like the number one fear. I think Jerry Seinfeld like once made a joke about it. Like, the number one fear people have is public speaking. The second fear is the fear of death. And so there is, and so most people would rather be laying in the casket than giving the eulogy. So with you, where did that desire, that unnatural desire for being on stage and speaking in front of people come from?
It really is unnatural for most people. For me, I always liked the idea of entertaining. For a long time, I wanted to be either an actor or a comedian. I remember saying to my best friend, I was with him and his mom, and she was like, "You're always funny. You're always acting stupid." And she said, "You might as well get paid for it one day." And so I started exploring that idea and fantasizing about it. And I was a musician. I taught myself to play the guitar at 12 and been playing since. So then it was on to be a rock star. But there was always this desire to be in front of people and deliver some type of value. I just didn't know what it was. And one of my favorite verses in the Bible says that man makes his plans, but God directs his steps. I knew the destination. I just didn't know what it looked like. So eventually in discovering speaking and getting in front of people, I realized I'm kind of entertaining, but not enough to be a comedian. I can communicate well. So it's just the process of evolving and opportunities I had, discovered that I was good at speaking to people, and then dove into it and really meticulously studied the great speakers of history to the point where I would find their talks on YouTube. And as I watched them, I would break them down and I would outline, where's the transition? How did they use humor? How did they pull people in and create a moment? And I got really good at it to the point where other speakers started asking me to coach them. And then that moved into the space of coaching and then an agency. So speaking was really the foundation that opened up the door for coaching, business partnerships, agency, because when you can communicate well, you can really reach anybody and get yourself noticed.
And so was this all happening while you're still in ministry, or had you already stepped away from it, or like what was that process? Was this kind of was ministry your first job out of school, or how did the evolution of AJ Adams happen?
Yeah, so out of school is funny. Doesn't really apply to me. I am a middle school dropout. After 5th grade, going to public school, my parents decided to homeschool. 6th grade, kind of did school, and then through the rest of it, through high school, probably did the equivalent of 1 year of study. Eventually dropped out, got a GED. So then I went into ministry. I actually went and did an internship in Australia for a big megachurch there. And that's actually where I discovered that I had a skill for speaking. We were in a college or a school campus rather, for the college program that I was in. It was an internship. So we were doing a day of games and things like that for kids. Well, they were getting all unruly. These are middle schoolers. And I just got up on stage and started talking to them. And apparently I was really entertaining. I captivated their attention. Well, word got around to the youth pastor. And then I was asked to go into a couple of schools and actually do more of that. That was the beginning of me then going into youth ministry, which led to the moment I talked about with the coaching and motivational speaking. So it all happened at the same time. It was really intertwined. Yeah. And then eventually in maybe around 2014, I made the full transition where I was working a job, but then came out of a tough season of ministry and just went full into the business world and, working a side job, having a business on the side, and, eventually went full time in 2016 with speaking. And now we're here.
Yeah. And so, first of all, I'm glad that you didn't use your black belt skills on the unruly students and you used your speaking skills to get them in place. And so, the speaking full time after that point. So were you a topical speaker? Like what was what did you lean into when it came to speaking? What was your thing that you brought to the audience?
Initially, I was, and I think this is true for a lot of speakers, I was the generic speaker. Just let's get you motivated. And then I realized I have to have something real to talk about. So I invested in a coach, and he taught me the concept, or just made me aware of the concept of brand. And that's where the Black Belt Leadership Speaker came. What do I have? What's my story? So I started speaking on leadership and tying in martial arts principles with that. So it was a lot of bigger conferences for student leadership organizations. That evolved then into just more speaking into entrepreneurship and more business type conferences, which is still what I do today. So it's been an evolution of identifying what is my brand, and really what is my brand. The underlying question there is, what's my story? Right. So when I really found my stride between Black Belt Leadership Speaker and speaking to business owners and entrepreneurs, was a season where I was just telling my story. Right. My story of overcoming, growing up in poverty. And that's when it really started to connect, because it wasn't abstract principles. I was telling my personal story and then teaching from that. And then from there, I could teach leadership. I could teach connecting with people, relationships, seeking mentors. And that just really opened up a lot more opportunity. That was much more authentic.
Yeah. And so with, you mentioned you grew up in poverty. Where did the motivation for yourself come in? You said you did motivation, you did public speaking and helping people be the best. Where did that come from for you?
That's a really good question. When I really think about it, there was always something there because I grew up on a tiny island, the island of Guam. My mom is from there, so I'm, the indigenous people are called Chamorros. So I'm half Chamorro, I'm half black. So I like to say I'm Chamoka. That's how I brand it. But there was always something in me that just didn't fit with the small island mentality. It's same as a small town. Most people stay there. They never leave. They might go on vacation, but they pretty much stay there. I always dreamt bigger, like world impact. And then at 19, when I went to Australia, I saw the impact that you could make with a great message, a powerful message, and then started speaking. So there was always something in me that just saw there was something bigger. And I can only attribute that to what God created me for, what I'm called to do. So that fire was always there. I just had to find what that looked like. And eventually I did.
Yeah. Well, and I think with, coming from a place where, the opportunities were a lot less and having that be a part of you, there is certain people that have this nomadic or this desire for more ingrained into them. For some people, it's a moment, it's a teacher, it's a mentor, it's a parent, it's a grandparent, it's somebody that puts that into them and shows them the possibilities of, there can be more to where you're at now. And so, as you kind of moved into what you're doing now, you found a way to blend a little bit of your story into your speaking that kind of gave you I don't want to use the word gimmick because it can almost have a negative connotation, but it gave you the differentiator with what you were doing with the speaking by adding the black belt part to it. And I think a lot of people, they try and find a gimmick, but it's not authentic. It's not a part of who they are. They're just jumping onto a trend or they're jumping onto something that doesn't feel real. And so, I think that's a good head smack, or that's a good thing for people to think about is what in your life can you merge with what you're wanting to do? Like what in your past, what in your story can you merge into what you're wanting to do? And so, so you were doing the black belt, motivational speaking. How long did that last? And then what was next?
That lasted maybe a year until I transitioned to really just telling my story. And I want to touch on something you said and add to it. I was just on a coaching call with a bunch of people. I have a community of people who are creating offers. And the whole foundation that I taught was you have to start with your story, because in a world where, and marketing has evolved over the last 50 decades, you look at the 20s and 30s was radio, it was print, and then it was radio, and then television, then the 50s and 60s was the golden age of television, and then the 90s was the internet. So it just keeps evolving. And in a world where we keep having all of this technology that makes it easier to reach people, easier to advertise, the only differentiator you have is your story, aka your brand. So I teach people to start with your story. And what's amazing is they'll come to me with no idea what they should offer. And then we dig into their story and it's right there. Yeah. So, that was a couple of years of that part of my story. Then I focused really on my personal story. And that just kept evolving into more storytelling and, eventually really honing in on the power of just telling a story. And that led into marketing and how I approach everything I do now.
So talk to me about Taco Bell.
Yeah, the Taco Bell. So that was a moment. And I think I wholeheartedly believe in everyone's story, there's always something in you that's always there. But then there are moments within your story that are a catalyst to the greater story. You think of a story as really an epic. An epic is a collection of smaller stories within a greater pervading theme of the story. And the Taco Bell moment for me was when I was in ministry. And this was 2 years before I transitioned out of full-time ministry to really focus just on career and business. I moved my family. We were living in Phoenix, Arizona at the time. My wife had 2 daughters at the time, and they were young. This was late or mid 2012. We moved to Riverside, California to be part of a church plant. And I had just started my speaking business a year before. Was barely into it. I had just transitioned to the Black Belt Leadership Speaker brand, and we moved to launch this youth ministry in a very young church. We get there, day one, 6 hours of driving, Everything's packed in the U-Haul. Sold everything we had except for the essentials. And my wife says, "Hey, we need to get some lunch. And the kids are hungry. It was a long drive." So I pull into a Taco Bell, and as I'm ordering Taco 12 pack, it's like 15, 17 bucks at the time. I get to the window and I hand the girl my card, and she says to me the words you never want to hear anyone say: "Sir, I'm sorry, your card was declined."
Wow.
It's embarrassing. It's humiliating. If you have money and your card is declined, it's infuriating. Well, at that moment, I realized as I pulled out of the drive-thru in shame, parked in a parking spot, I pulled up my phone, I looked at my bank account, and I had 2 bank accounts at the time. My Chase bank account was negative $250. My other bank account was negative maybe $100. I have nothing. I didn't account for the bills that were going to go through, final payments on things. I had one more paycheck coming, but it was days away. So here I am sitting, I have no money. We look around the car, and my wife's concerned, obviously, as she should be. See, my daughter's in the back seat. Okay, what am I going to do? Look around the car. We have one Ziploc bag with random change that we collected as it fell out of the furniture when we were moving. I've got $5.38 to my name. That's it.
Wow.
To be honest, Paul, I don't remember what happened between that moment and the rest of the day is a blur. I can't remember. But I do remember that moment realizing I messed up. I don't know how to make money. I don't know how to multiply money. I haven't mastered money. I am a slave to money because I'm subject to it, how much I have. And that was the moment I decided, never again. I will never put my family in this position again. And I'd love to say from there, everything changed. No, it was another several years of struggle and trial and learning and obsessively studying before anything really changed. But that moment was necessary for me to realize I can change this and I have to.
Right. And there was probably a lot of failing forward, right?
A lot of failing forward because failure is the only way you really learn lessons. And I had to make a lot of failures.
Right. Well, and I think people fear failure. They fear that it's the end. They fear that it's an identity. They fear that, I can't take risk because of the possibility of failure. And so for you, that Taco Bell moment started a series of changes and failures, but they led ultimately to a change. So when did stuff start coming together for you?
So that's interesting. Things came together at different times. So that was 2012. For the next 2 years, we did ministry and just struggled incredibly. I took a second job. I was getting $1,500 a month from the church I was working at. Then another $1,500, 12 bucks an hour at a full-time job working as a janitor. I'm scrubbing toilets every day. I'm riding the floor sweeper, Zamboni looking thing.
Yeah.
But every day I've got my headphones in, which this is before AirPods. I had my wires hanging out, my phone in my pocket, and I'm listening to Les Brown.
Yeah.
Zig Ziglar. I'm studying finance and Robert Kiyosaki because I identified that in that Taco Bell moment, I don't know about money. I don't know business. I don't know finance. I don't know how to sell. I don't know how to build. I've been just kind of living life from what I knew. So I obsessively studied everything I could. And at the same time, I was writing my first book because I was documenting what I was learning as I was learning and implementing it. So 2 years later, things are reached their peak. And the moment was when the lead pastor called me into his office. He sat me down and he said, "AJ, you look like crap."
Wow.
And those weren't the exact words. He was very straightforward with me, which I appreciate. But he essentially said, "I see your family struggling." The church was helping me as much as they could. He personally helped me financially. But we were at a point where it just wasn't working. I had put ministry in a place where I was serving people to the detriment of my own family.
Wow.
And it was a lesson I learned since then, which has led to the business / ministry I have now, helping people get rich and give generously. Because in ministry, there was fulfillment, but there was no money. In business, I've made money, but there wasn't fulfillment. So now I brought those two together, which we can talk about. But at the end of 2014, that moment, he said, "I care about you and your family more than I care about what you're doing in ministry. This is not good for you. So we can't continue like this." So he fired me. but he
Oh, wow.
did it in grace and love. I had the full support of everyone. So we stayed another 6 months as we figured out what to do. And it was all love, no shame. And then we left there, and I said, I've got to go in. I've got to learn how to apply everything I've been studying. So I got into sales. I sold cars for a couple months. I got into a startup company. I did door-to-door sales for business to business. Then I got into telemarketing sales, insurance sales. I just kept learning everything I could to make money.
Yeah.
And it was tough for a long time. But then in 2016, 2017, when I started to catch some stride in the speaking business is when I launched full-time, left my full-time job, went all in on speaking, still more struggle. And then in 2018, through speaking at an event, I caught the attention of an investor who had a business partner. His business partner was a guy who was big in branding.
Yeah.
Nobody knows his name. They wouldn't know who he is, but they know the brands that he's built. Jennifer Lopez clothing line, Nicki Minaj. He was the president of one of Tommy Hilfiger's companies. He took Daymond John's company, Fubu, from 80 million to internationally $800 million.
Wow.
We became business partners, and we wrote a book together. It became a #1 bestseller. It's still available on Amazon. The $1 billion branding blueprint. I ghost wrote the book, so my name's there in small letters, but essentially wrote the book using his content and IP and then my own. And then that opened the door to working with celebrity clients. And that's when things really started to turn around. But I'd be lying if I said it was just perfect from there. There were still more challenges.
Yeah.
That same year, the only employee we had, because we were operating pretty lean, we had a $100 million brand that we were managing brand and social media for. We had other clients that we were doing websites and brand design for. Well, one day he just decides, I'm not making enough money. I'm going to resign via email while I'm in Las Vegas. We're based in Phoenix.
Oh, wow.
I'm in Las Vegas doing an interview on my podcast at the time with Brad Lee. And I get this email on the way there that he resigns. I call him, I text him, he doesn't respond. He completely ghosts me, steals a company laptop. He's holding our clients hostage because he's managing the projects. And it was a tough season. We had to basically start over and, several more years of trial and error. And this is what most people, this may be a head smack for most people. You mentioned people look at failure as it's final. I have a relentless optimism and stubbornness. I kept going. I kept trying and trying and trying. And you have to. You have to.
And that was born in you from the island, right?
Yeah. I mean, I knew what I grew up with, but I was determined that I'm going to build what I envision because I feel that's what I'm called to do. So it was still a lot of trial and error from there, a lot of great opportunities, hosting a masterminds, and we had a suite with, Grant Cardone's second 10X Growth Con ever. And, Ty Lopez's team was in there, a bunch of other people who have now grown in their, bigger names. But it was a lot of just the journey of learning. And the more difficult your journey is, I would write these phrases for myself. And during that season, one I wrote is, if you're not yet where you want to be, it's because you're not yet who you need to be. So all these failures and ups and downs and mistakes, that's because you have a lot to learn. Well, it was easier for someone else. They didn't have as much that needed to be shaped or to be learned. So I had a lot to learn. I was starting from zero, so it's going to be much harder.
And what do you feel is the greatest thing that you learned in that? And before we, talk about where you're at now, what's your biggest takeaway from some of those journeys and finding out who you are?
It's what I realized when things started to change and what I hold on to now and what I built my business around now. And I believe every person's created for a purpose. You have something you're called to do. And it's a matter of aligning the doing with the being. As men, we tie so much of our value or self-worth to what we do. And in business, whether you're male or female, it's about what you do. And you can do incredible things and still be depressed, still be suicidal. We see that with celebrities. Robin Williams, one of the most hilarious, did amazing things for comedy as a genre, but he was depressed and he was suicidal and eventually took his own life.
Yeah.
So the big takeaway is you'll have success when you shift from focusing on what you're doing to growing and focusing on who you're being. And who I needed to be was faithful to what I believe God had created me to do, to help people, to get rich and give generously, to where it's no longer about money, it's about transformation. And the focus is not on the money we make, but on the people we help. And if we focus on helping people by giving value, people will pay for that value. We will get rich, and then we can give generously back from that. But the internal impact is there, and it's no longer about just dollars, because I chased dollars, chased money. But anytime things have come effortlessly is when I focused on how can I serve and help people and love people.
So when it comes to finding out who you are, that's a tough thing. That's a challenging thing. What are some of the things that you help people with when it comes to finding out who they are? Where do you start? Like, somebody comes to you and it's like, okay, I'm ready to go. I'm ready to do this thing. Where do you start with them?
I start, my business is built around, my business is my ministry. So I talked earlier about how in ministry I was fulfilled, in business I made money, but the two never came together. If you're in ministry, you're broke because there's not money in it unless you have a mega church. And then if you're in business, it's great, there's results, but it's not as fulfilling. And I remember a campaign I ran for a client where they had never done paid marketing. We took them from $0 to $3 million in less than 4 months. And the most powerful part from that I'm most proud of is from that, their part of the campaign was that for every deal that was closed, they were going to give thousands of dollars away to charity, because that was something that was important to them. So from that campaign, we did $3 million at a 40x ROI. But more importantly, we fed thousands of families through the charitable giving that was a part of that campaign. So when I talk to someone, I go to their story, like I mentioned earlier. And for some people, that's enough. But I fully believe, and this is how I live my life, there's a deeper level beyond your story and who you are. And the key is, where do you find your identity? Most people are asking the question, who am I? Which is fine. You can establish an identity. But for me, what I teach my clients and the circle of influence I have is not so much who you are, but whose you are. And I'm a big believer, if you don't have something to anchor your identity to, then you'll never really find that, and it'll change. So my identity is anchored in who I am in Jesus Christ. That is who I am. And from that, everything else stems. And not everyone's going to agree with that. And that's fine. But what are you anchoring your identity to? Because if it's fluid, and if you're anchoring your identity to a group of people whose identity can change, then you don't really have an anchor. So I've anchored my identity. I teach my clients to anchor their identity to something and someone who has never and will never change. And from that, you're rock solid. Yeah.
And so, there was a time, so you started working and talking about that, but there was a time where, you spent time with Grant Cardone. Was that a detour, a distraction, or a learning experience for you?
I'm really glad you asked the question. It's a really insightful question. Unfortunately, there's only so much I can say there until my non-compete runs out. But it was definitely a learning experience. Phenomenal experience. So many phenomenal things about how he's built his companies. And here's the thing: when you're growing and evolving, and that's a process, brands evolve and people evolve and learn, and you'll go through seasons where I was in a place where at the end of 2020, business was really struggling. We'd been hit hard. My father was sick. There's a lot of family stuff going on. And so I realized I need to make a shift. I have skills. I'm good at what I do, but in building this business and coming out of the how our business was hit, 2018 when employees stole for us, 2019 business partners did us wrong. They changed contracts on us. And then 2020, COVID, it was like 3-4 years of just hit after hit after hit. I made the decision, I need to get stability. So I'm going to take my skills and go put them somewhere that I know I can make a massive impact and learn at the same time. So that was going to work for one of Grant's companies. And there I was a director of marketing. So I led a team of fractional CMOs. I actually built that team. I rebuilt the team. All the client-facing marketing strategies and frameworks I developed from my experience, and then hired more experienced people to really beef up that team. They recruited my wife. She became the controller. So during our time there, we were able to make a really great impact, really transform some things and add a lot of value. But it came to the point where just the way of doing business and the philosophy of doing business no longer aligned with who we were. As we learned more about, there's what you see on the surface, and then there's what is the underlying goals and mission of an organization or a person. And as we learned that, we saw this doesn't align with who we are.
Yeah.
So we made a decision. We took a 5-day retreat, and we did what's called a vision retreat, where we just planned and prayed and prepared and connected with each other and got really clear on what are we building and why. And 3 months later, we left, and we launched our company now that we have, Thousand Hills Consulting, and we're serving clients in a way that we feel is more beneficial for them and us.
So, it sounded like it was a clarifying moment for you of maybe things that you realized, maybe I don't want to do this, maybe it was a revealed a part of you that you didn't see. What was the greatest lesson out of that for you?
The greatest lesson was I can make a lot of money. Collectively, my wife and I, we were making multiple six figures and taking home multiple six figures. And I was selling. I was, top 3 salesperson outside of the actual sales team, and I outsold them sometimes. Made a lot of money for myself and my wife, made a lot of money for clients. But like I was saying earlier, at the end of it, I asked the question, well, eternally, what is this for? What's the impact of this? Because there was still this client that stood in my mind. They had the same faith beliefs, and they gave so much money to charity. And I was able to feel great about what I did in their business, but more importantly, how their business then impacted people. And so at the end of this vision retreat, my wife and I praying through things. What are we going to do? Where are we going? We're sitting in church that Sunday. So we started on a Monday. On Sunday, we're in church. And I just felt like it was downloaded into me. I'm sitting there during the service, and I'm thinking, okay, God, what am I supposed to do? And immediately I get the thought of Psalm 50, which is where God says, I own the cattle on 1,000 hills. And the context of that passage is he's talking to his people, and he's actually rebuking them. He's scolding them and saying, you're giving all these offerings faithfully, but I don't need your offerings. Don't you know I own the cattle on 1,000 hills? If I'm hungry, I won't ask you. I own it all. I want your heart behind it. And that clicked for me. It's not about money. Money's not good. Money's not evil. Money's a tool. Just like a hammer isn't good or evil. It's what you use it for. And what you use it for is predicated on what your heart is behind it and how you view your relationship with that thing. So I pulled out my phone, started jotting down notes. I wrote the whole business plan, the whole brand, all the business tenets of Thousand Hills Consulting in about 5 minutes. Wow. Just wrote it all out and then started building. So our mission, because of that, is to help people get rich so they can give generously. But there's 2 sides to it. We help them learn how to help more people. When you help people by adding value, people pay you, you get rich. And then from those riches, you then give generously, which then helps more people. So our mission as a company and as my wife and I's people is to help people to get rich and give generously by showing them building systems and marketing campaigns, doing the execution so they can help people, they can get rich, and they can give generously.
So I want to talk a little bit more about that. But do you feel it was that moment for you was a come back to Jesus moment? Did it feel like a comeback or a augmentation of what was already there?
It absolutely felt like a comeback because I felt like I was kind of Moses in the desert for a while. Like, okay, I gotta just get some stability and financially, make some money. And I've learned all this stuff. I'm great at what I do. I'm better than most, but I'm just not seeing it reflected in what I'm generating, what I'm producing. So I went there for that season. But it was really, I always wanted and always had the lingering, nagging question. I love serving people, but in serving people, and admittedly, there was some bitterness and resentment. I've served people since I was a kid in church, and I've always been broke. Then I'm here making all this money, but I'm not as fulfilled.
Yeah.
God, how do I bring the two together so that my business is my ministry and my ministry is my business? And that was the culmination of that. So it was a coming back to Jesus. It was a finally aligning, and almost as if he said, I've taken you through all this, and now I'm going to reveal to you what I've been preparing you for all this time. And so that's where we're at now. And that's what we're building.
Well, it sounds like it's another black belt situation, where you merged the black belt experience with speaking, and you found a way to merge those two and become, fulfilled in what you were doing, because you merge these two parts of your life, the black belt, the martial arts training with public speaking. And it sounds like this was another version of that, where you took your, relationship with Jesus and you found a way to merge that with your experience in marketing. And now you're doing what you're doing. So tell me a little bit more about, that experience, that writing down everything within 5 minutes. Was that prompted by just the verse, or was there something else that had happened in your life that really kind of pushed you in that particular direction?
It was really prompted by the verse. I mean, obviously it's a lot of things. I talk about transformations, and there's macro transformation, which was a complete shift in what I'm doing, how I'm thinking. But there's the micro transformations, which are the small moments of revelation, of epiphany that ultimately culminate. All the little head smacks, like head taps, and then a big head smack. So that was the head smack moment. And it's kind of similar to the black belt, tying that in. The difference is, whereas the black belt, tying that in with speaking, that was about what I was doing, what I did as a black belt, and then what I did as a speaker. Conversely, with this shift, it was finally graduating to the level of not what I was doing, but who I was being, I was being in business, who I was being in ministry. I had done business, had done ministry, but what was missing was I was not being who I was supposed to be. So everything was thrown out of alignment. This was finally a culmination of all of those years and the shaping and realizing who I'm called to be. And from who I'm called to be, now I can do what I've been called to do. So it was a lot of things. And that verse just anchored it and was like the final piece to unlock what it looked like and shape the direction of what we're building now.
Well, I think that happens for a lot of us. I think there's always, at least it happens for me, like, in the naming of this podcast, in coming up with the tagline. For me, when I work with stuff, because I'm visual in a lot of ways, and sometimes verbal as well. Like, if I have a new idea, I've got to create a logo for it first. Like, that's the first thing that I've got. Like, what's the identity for this? What's the look and feel for this? And that's the way I work. I've got to be able to visualize it. And if I can't solve that, I almost feel like I'm locked down. Like, I can't move forward until I have that. And so even in the naming of the podcast and the tagline, that was important for me to find that anchor, that trigger, that catalyst that moved you forward. And it sounds like that verse, there'd been some wrestling going on in your life, but that verse was that catalyst that just anchored everything together and said, this is the way, this is, follow this path. And so, when it comes to, others that might be wrestling with, combining, what they do with a mission, what are some of the first things that you try and deal with somebody that might be feeling that same restlessness or anxiousness about their life? What do you, with the people that you help now, what do you start working with first?
I asked for their story. I asked, what are you passionate about? Because in that, I'm asking questions to hear how they speak, hear what they're saying. And is it focused on doing, or is it focused on being? And 99% of the time, there's a misalignment between what they're wanting to do and who they're striving to be. And until those two things are in alignment, nothing else will come together. It'll be confusing and blurry. So that's the first thing. It's the person. Like, what's the transformation that the person needs before they can create the transformation mechanism that they can then market and sell to help other people? You think of it like the fitness, think of it like the fitness expert. Before they can help other people get fit and lose weight, well, they have to do that.
Right.
So this is where so many people get into business and they think, well, what can I sell? What will people buy? Well, people will buy a lot of things and you can sell a lot of things. But if you want to have longevity and have integrity in what you're doing, then you have to start with, well, who are you? What is your story? And what are you passionate about? So I ask people 3 questions. What are you passionate about? From the things you're passionate about, which do you have the most knowledge of? And from those, narrowing down further, where do you have real expertise in that you have taken your knowledge and applied it, and through experience of application, you've proven expertise. Go do that. Because now it's a part of your story and it adds value to someone else. So a lot of people will teach, find a market that has a need and then offer them a product or service based on that need. You can do that. But if you really want to be transformational, start with your story and ask, from my story, who can I best serve? And that's a pervading theme throughout the entire Bible. There's the scripture that says we overcome by the blood of the Lamb, the word of our testimony. Well, the blood of the Lamb speaks to Jesus' life and sacrifice, his story. And then our testimony is our story. So his story, our story, is how we conquer and overcome. Well, if you take that same principle, and I wrote a book recently called the Bible Business Blueprint. And the whole premise of the book is, if we believe what the Bible says, why will we not apply it not only to our relationships and our daily living, but to everything we do, including how we operate our business? All the principles are there. Who are you? Who are you called to be? What is the story? And what has been put in your hands, practical skills, knowledge, talents that you can then leverage to turn into a product or service that helps and blesses and serves other people.
And most people, when they talk about the Bible, they don't really talk about it in the context of business. So what are some verses or what are some principles that you've discovered that would surprise people?
I think what would surprise people, and I put out things intentionally on social media, particularly Facebook, and I will put out things that seem controversial. So one thing is, people have a complete misunderstanding of what prosperity means. Whether it's in church circles or outside, most people are slaves to money. And there's a scripture in Matthew 6 that says, you can't serve 2 masters. You'll love one and hate the other. You can't serve God and money. That's the context. But prior to that, what the passage says is God saying that everything you need will be provided for you. If I provide for the birds of the air, the grass of the field, clothes, food, shelter, you will always have those. Those are promised. Anything above that is a blessing. So we see this dichotomy all throughout scripture of, don't chase money. It's hard for a rich man to get into heaven. Money isn't everything. And then we see God blessing people with money and using it for good. So what happens is, people don't look at the whole. They want to take certain verses that align with what they already think and confirm that. But it's like anything else. You have to take everything in context. What was being said, who was it being said to, and why? And the concept of prosperity, if you look at the Bible as a whole, is you will have everything you need in abundance to whatever measure aligns with what you're called to do and who you're called to be. Money is not evil. Money is a tool. There are righteous rich, there are unrighteous rich. So that's one thing. But then looking just at Jesus' life, just his life alone, if we take nothing else in the Bible, just his life, there is a 5-step method that I see, and I wrote my Bible Business Blueprint book on this, that I see he used for the Great Commission, or what you could call a great campaign. And so I build every marketing campaign based on that 5-step framework. The first step is you serve people. He would go out before he ever preached, before he'd ever did anything, he would serve people. His first miracle at the start of his ministry was to go to a wedding, and when they ran out of wine, he turned water into wine. And then the master of the house, they gave it to him first, he tasted it, and he was blown away. And he said to the groom, most people serve the good wine first, and after everyone's drunk, they serve the garbage wine. It's like you saved the best for last. Because in that custom, it would have been incredibly embarrassing to run out of wine at a wedding. So Jesus' first miracle was to serve. And we see that with the feeding of the 5,000 all throughout his ministry. When he served people, he would serve them by solving a problem. we're out of wine. We don't have anything to eat. I'm blind. I can't walk. So he would serve them by solving a problem. To solve the problem, he would supply a deep need. We need wine, or we're going to be embarrassed and humiliated, and our family's going to be put to shame. I need sight, or else I can't see. The woman had a hemorrhage. He healed that. So he supplied the deep need. So you serve, you solve, you supply. And in doing that, you save people from their plight. If you help someone who's homeless, you save them from homelessness. You save them from blindness or shame. But that's where most businesses stop. That's the transaction. Okay, we've gotten the conversion, we got our money, and we're good. But anyone who's in business, who has a thriving business, whether it's Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk, will tell you, you need to create some longevity, recurring revenue, and increase that customer lifetime value. Now we're putting in business context. Yeah. That looks like sustaining people. And so Jesus, after the conversion, sustained. He left and said, I'm leaving you now the Holy Spirit, who will continue to teach you, continue to fellowship with one another. And so the conversion is salvation. The sustaining is the continual process of growing and learning and becoming more like him. Sanctification is what the Bible calls it.
Right.
So you serve, you solve, you supply, you save, and then you have to sustain. Yeah. And if you just look at Jesus' life and take those principles and apply that to your business, it will transform the way you do everything in business.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So which one of those do you think people struggle with the most?
I think they struggle with viewing the Bible as a book that applies to everything in their life. First of all, it's a good book, it's good principles, but when you really submit to Christ and what he teaches, it will transform everything you do. But the thing that people struggle with, I would say the serving part first, because the way I approach things, for example, I have a community that I'm growing, just recently launched. And in that, I've taken every course I've ever created, all my best courses that I've sold for as little as $100 to $10,000. They're free. It's all free. There's no fee for anything.
Yeah.
The only thing I charge for is my direct help in the implementation. That's how I serve.
Yeah.
I will give you something to help you. And Zig Ziglar said it. This is not a new principle, but Zig Ziglar, who was also a Christian, he said, if you want, the way to get everything you want in life is to help other people get what they want in life.
Right.
Like he was using the same principle, and he got it from the same place.
Yeah.
So people struggle with serving and adding value on the front end without it giving them anything immediately in return. Are you willing to just serve people? No, even if you get nothing from it, because it shifts the paradigm of how you approach business. Give value that actually helps people and ask nothing for it. And here's the amazing thing. If you give people value, and we saw this in Jesus' life, the feeding of the 5,000, he fed them, asked nothing, left, and they chased him down. They were so excited, so blown away by the miracle he performed and how he served them, that it says he actually had to escape because the crowd would have taken him, because they wanted to make him king. When you serve people at a high level and just give them freely, and they feel that and they know that because you're truly doing it, it's not what you do, it's who you're being. You can give freely and do that, but if you're not being a generous person, people will feel that. It's very obvious. When you do that, they will want more. They will ask, well, what else do you have? I'll pay you. And now they're throwing their credit card at you for you to give them even more value. And you went from helping people for free to now getting rich, and then you continue giving generously.
So when it comes to serving, what's the first mindset block that people need to get rid of to be able to step into that?
It's the Bible talks about the lust of the flesh and the pride of life. It's the shift from thinking about what you want and need to focusing on what other people want and need. And I've done that my entire life, but there has to be wisdom in it. If you're doing it to the point where you don't have wisdom, you don't have a plan for how to monetize that in business, you'll go broke, and you'll give, and you're actually giving foolishly. You have to give strategically and intentionally. Again, look at the Bible. There's a scripture that says, don't cast your pearls before swine. The concept is there is don't give your pearls, your value, to a pig. A pig doesn't understand the concept of what you're offering. So don't just give it out to everybody. Think about who is this actually going to help the most and give it to that person. I don't teach 12-year-olds how to create high ticket offers and do marketing and build marketing systems, because for them, it doesn't make sense. I teach that to business owners for whom it holds great value. So there's wisdom in doing that. So you can't just take one thing. So that people struggle with understanding the difference between the knowledge of what to do and the wisdom of who to be in doing that thing.
Wow, that's powerful. Well, yeah, when it comes to the whole casting your pearl before swine, it's the idea that pigs will eat anything. Like,
Exactly.
they're not going to value it. They're not going to see it as anything more than they'll eat a stone as quickly as they'll eat a pearl. It doesn't matter to them. They'll eat whatever. And so finding the right audience that'll actually not only appreciate it, but take action on it, take action on the principles, take action on the wisdom, take action on those head smacks, and not ignore them and say, hey, I can handle this, as their face is swelling up, they're being hit with the wisdom and the head smacks, and they're just like not implementing and then not reacting to it in the right way. And so I think, that mindset and having the right attitude, I think helps them get over that serving aspect of the principles. Are there any others within the serving that you find that you've got to work with people and their mindset on, that, because there's so much teaching out there, from all kinds of sources, whether they're religious, faith-based or not. What out of the principles that out of the 5 S's, what's another one that people have to recalibrate on?
Is the sustaining part. Really all of them, but to pick one would be the sustaining part, because that's where, again, you have to have wisdom in how are you going to do that. They've paid you, but now how do you sustain that? How do you continue helping them? And for some people, it's the tension of, well, I don't really know what else I have of value to offer. And so there's a lack of confidence there. And again, that goes to, what are you doing? And not focusing on who you're being, and who you're being is tied to, not who you are, but whose you are. So again, it goes back to your identity. What is your identity? Where is that founded and grounded? And if it's grounded in a place that's shallow, well, then you're going to feel like you don't have much to give. I had a coaching session with someone just this week, and I said, well, what's your fear around creating an offer and going into business? And he said, well, fear of failing, fear that I might, let my family down or invest a bunch of money and it won't work. And I said, what I'm really hearing is that you're not certain of who you are. And your perception of yourself is flawed, and it's really, it's self-deprecating to the point that you don't actually believe in yourself. You have to fix that first, because who you're being dictates what you do, and nothing you do will work if you continue to be this person that believes you have little value to offer. So it really starts, again, going back to, who are you being? Nothing will work. That's why there's so much mindset coaching and training. But I'm a big believer that the greatest mindset training is really not a mindset shift, but a soul shift. And that's what even the most successful people in the world are missing, and why you can have all the money in the world, and like the Bible says, what good is it to gain the world yet lose your soul? In other words, you can get all this stuff, but you'll still be empty because you've not changed and experienced transformation in the one area where it matters most, and that's your identity and who you are.
So soul shift, you use that phrase. What does that mean?
So a mindset shift is shift from thinking one way to thinking a different way. A soul shift is, I'm going to go straight to what the Bible says. We are separated from Christ. Sin can't be in his presence. Without him, we're lost. A lot of people aren't going to agree with that, and that's fine, because truth doesn't require your endorsement. It's true whether you believe it or not. But there needs to be a shift, and people who've experienced it, like myself, like you, can attest, my life is different and is not the same since I acknowledged Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. There's a shift that happens that you can't see from the outside, but the person who's experienced it knows, I see differently, I hear differently, I feel guided in what I do, and I feel like I'm doing 1% while 90% is just falling into my lap, while 99% is just happening and falling into place. Well, it's not that it's falling into place. It's that you're being who you were created to be. Like Ephesians 2, 8 through 10 says, we're God's workmanship created in Christ Jesus for good works that that are laid ahead of us, that we should walk into them. Well, if I'm created to be this person and I walk in alignment with that, it says that all the good things are laid ahead of me and I just have to walk into them. So if I'm not experiencing them, I'm not walking in that direction. And if I'm not walking in that direction, it's because I've not yet acknowledged and realized who I was created to be. Therefore, I'm not being that person.
So is that your anchor verse or your catalytic verse for identity, similar to your Thousand Hills verse that kind of anchored a thought? Is that your anchor thought around identity, or the anchor scripture?
I'd say it is. It's the one that I always go back to because it really says it all there. I mean, workmanship implies intentionally crafted. I mean, if a carpenter designs a tool or a chair or a table, it's intentional. Right. There's a specific intention and design behind that for the functionality, and it also implies that there's great attention to it, and there's a love behind it, and it wasn't just thrown together. That's why this idea of evolution makes no sense, because there's too much complexity in the human being for it to not have been intentional in man's creation. It just doesn't make sense. Yeah. So that verse, I feel like, encapsulates the whole experience of man. You're created with purpose by a creator who's already laid things ahead of you that you should walk into them. If you align with that, you'll walk into them and you'll be blessed.
So who would this not be for? Like who would struggle with this? Where do they need to be mentally or, financially, or like who would be the person that'd be like, no, this is not the right fit for you?
I've seen a lot of those people, because as I put out content, I'm gauging my audience and I'm removing people from my audience and adding people. And what I've seen is it's people who really at the core have a contention with God. I don't want to accept it. I don't believe it. I'm an atheist. Well, the idea of atheism is it's an oxymoron, because your whole religion or belief system is based off of the non-existence of someone. Well, if that person doesn't exist, why would you base a whole religion on their non-existence? It's because at the core, you believe that they truly do exist. And God's put in the heart and soul of every man to know that he exists. So this is not for people who who've submitted to just do things their way. Who just, if you just want to make money, this is not for you. If you don't actually care about people and love people, it's not for you. If you believe that you evolved from monkeys, it's not for you. Go do what monkeys do. This is for people who believe that, who believe and desire to do something and be something that has eternal consequence. And they believe that there's more to life than just the years we have on this planet, but what they do here echoes into eternity, and they want to experience that and see that. Whether or not you grew up in church or you believe in Jesus, if you're listening to this now and there's something that resonates with you, lean into that, because there's a thread that if you start pulling at it, you're going to discover a whole different, it's going to shift the paradigm of who you believe you are.
That's awesome. So for the person that this is really resonating with, they're like, man, you are speaking my language. This is something that I've been wrestling with. I like what you're saying. I need what you're saying. How do they get a hold of you?
Simplest way where I can give you the most value at completely free is gospelpatrons.io. And that's going to take you to the Gospel Patrons community that we've built for people like you who want to discover a greater purpose in business and make a greater impact. And there's $20,000 worth of free courses and training in there. I go live every single week and give more training, and there's nothing to buy in the community. There's absolutely nothing. If you want to work with me, you'd have to ask directly. It's just massive value.
That's awesome, man. Well, AJ, it's been awesome having this conversation with you, and congratulations on stepping into this and finding a way to merge all of that experience you've had in marketing and branding and the journey that you've been on, and finally finding a place where you can bring all that together and make it something special. So I appreciate you being on today, man. Thank you so much.
Yeah, brother, I appreciate it. This was fun, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the show grows, and hopefully people got a lot of value from it.